are at the place. All right, we good on the sound check, and we're ready to move forward. You've tuned in to the A Plus Coaching Corner with yours truly, Carvel Monroe. Here you're going to get VIP coaching that's virtual, interactive, and practical. Listen, I began my life change decades ago, and I'm still pursuing greatness today. I've been involved with mentoring programs since 1999. That's when I won my first award, and I was featured in the Harvard Gazette for volunteering in the Cambridge Public High School. Since then, I've directed multiple mentoring programs on the East Coast. I've owned and operated a decent small business, working with my hands. I have 20 plus years in the marriage game, raising 3 children, and I've supported many others all the way to adulthood. I have taught people facing some tough circumstances, even in the county jail. But today, I am here just for you in the A Plus Coaching Corner. Well, welcome to the A Plus Coaching Corner. I'm your host, Carvel Monroe. We are now on session number 4. Session number 4 of this 5-part series that I've titled Student Success Coaching. And we did split one session, but however, it's literally 5 sessions we're working on. And today I'm hoping that we can get it all in on this session as well. There really is a lot of content for this one. And this is just, again, kind of like our live stream phase where we just kind of tap in just a little bit. For those of you who don't know what I generally do in these sessions, I bring kind of a rough draft of ideas that I present. And it's just a great way for me to connect, typically anyhow, with my audience. And then I go back and polish it up and present it. So as we come to the end of this 5-part series, know that we will have a downloadable content much more expansive than this, still in the process. So keep that in mind if you are looking for a way to support, or maybe you have somebody in mind that could benefit from this in greater detail. And I don't want to put too much out now, but we are tying it actually to a social studies curriculum as well. But it's a great way to develop, build relationships, build rapport, and get students, learners, to be more connected to the learning. Anyhow, so today we're going to talk about, as you saw in previously, we're going to talk about the power banks. Number 4 of this 5-part series. This is pretty good, and just so to give you an idea where we're going with this is, we're all powered, right, by something. Something moves us to do what we do. And this is important, especially when we're talking about, achieving this goal, right? Whatever that goal might be. We started off with the foundation question to say something like, 1 year from now, are you going to discover that people just tolerate you, or they tolerated you, or basically will they celebrate you, right? 1 year from today, will you be celebrated, or will you discover that people just tolerated you? And we're saying that to say sometimes we can be connected, we can be in the place and not be fully there. We could be on the team, but not be fully active and participating. We could be in the room, but not really making contributions on a great level of any sort. And I don't want that to be me, and I wouldn't want that to be you either. So the goal is to be more mindful of who we are and just to slay out, as y'all would say, so that when we come to the end of that journey, we could be someone that people recognize, like, wow, this person was awesome. They were excellent. They were on point. They were on fire, whatever the term you want to use. So we're going in today, and a lot to cover. Looking at my time, 9:05. We're going to try to work this thing, and I'm going to keep it within that hour time frame. But we do have a lot kind of to cover, but I might just take my time on a few things. So if you've been here from day one of the journey, awesome, great. And if not, don't sweat it, because I tend to do a little recap. And today being the fourth session, the way I'm recapping is a little bit different today. It's kind of a recap, but we're kind of synthesizing everything because we talked about a lot. And some days I'm more excited than others. I told you about, one of those sessions where I was a little bit off because my morning routine was a little bit off. So either way, today, as I come back, we're going to kind of synthesize it all, even as we recap, so you can better understand. In case you miss it and say, what was this guy talking about? He's saying a lot of good things, but I think I lost it along the way, right? That can happen. Hey, I kind of zone out too. So I'm going to put my clock up. I'm probably putting it prematurely, but I'll use that as a pace setter, and we'll be done by 10. So today, as we go in, I won't waste much time. I'm going to go in. We're talking about this power banks. What does this power banks have to do? Well, when we set our journey, right, we out to get a goal. A year from today, 6 months from today, end of this project, whatever. We want to be someone that people recognize. They celebrate us. They say, wow, this person was awesome to be on the team. But like we said from session 1, I said that along the way, because the journey's so long, we tend to forget what matters, right? That's kind of what happens no matter where we are. Life just does that to us. We can forget what happens to us. And so we pitched all these ideas out, and we go from there. So all the things we talked about, I put up on the screen right there. I'm going to put a background on it, but it might be a little harder to see. I like to present differently, not using these PowerPoint all the time and things of that nature. So I do it like this. So this is what I call this a pace cycle, right? I put a funky name up there, says Reby pace cycle. Let me do a background on it just in case you can't see that really well for those looking at it. All right, so with the background on it, you can kind of see something more like this. And so these are the topics that we've covered so far, except for the last one. So we're going to start with that pink color that says reflection point. That was the very first session that I did. I called it reflection point. And I'll break down what we went through. For now, I just want to introduce you to what I call my Reby pace chart, right? Got to make it creative. If you want to learn things or help things to stick, right? Sometimes you just got to be creative with it. So instead of using something simple, I could have tried to play with it. Reby. And the you can see there's a color that's coordinated with each section of what we talked about. So the reflection point session 1 really has to do with reflecting. And we just call that, it's a part of the pace cycle. It's the reflection. It's a reflecting point, right? Reflect. And then to your right, if we're moving clockwise, you see the purple and it says B. And that's where we talked about being a professional, right? If you remember that section, and I'll kind of recap each one of those sections for you. Again, I just want you to see the chart. And so that's the cycle. We call that part B. That's being a professional. And then third, which is our last session we did, it's the pit stops. And I kind of categorize that, well, you can see with that verb, call it a pause. So we got reflect, we got B, and then we have pause. Pause is the pit stops. Again, I'm going to kind of flesh that out a little bit, recap what we talked about in there. All right. And then today we're going into that power banks, which is the charge label. That's where we get charged up. And then right after that, in the green, and you see the charges like that bluish color. The green now is making deposits, or deep deposits is what I've labeled it here. Deep deposit, that's the expand. And we will get into that in our last session next Tuesday. Okay, so with this image now, hopefully this is in your mind. This can help it to stick for you, where it says B, reflect, B, pause, charge, and expand. Reflect, B, pause, charge, and expand. This is what I call that cycle of managing change, or change management, if you want to use that fancy term. This is important. This is important, right? And the reason why it's important is we want to know that as we're going through, as we're going through our agenda, our goal, whatever we're reaching for. It's a process. You hear that a lot. It's a process, and we have to manage that process. We have to do what we could do to try to manage that process. Got me? All that we can do to manage that process. And this, I call it a pace charts because it's kind of like a time thing, it's kind of like a distance thing, right? It has both like a rhythm and a tempo. And that's very important. And so we need to manage that as we move along. So let's go into each one of these now and break it down just a tad bit, right? So you see the pace chart, and each one of these, let's go into each one as we rock. So first of all, here's the pink, the reflect. When we talked about reflecting, we said part of the reflective work that needs to be done was to be honest, to focus on effort, right? To analyze and contrast. That's very important. We talked about being honest, meaning tapping into our feelings, how we really feel about something, and not really just, what do you call it? Not really just blowing it off, right? We tend to blow things off. What I mean by blowing things off, when we don't act as if it doesn't really matter. The experience we went through didn't really matter as much to us. And so we do things like that. So we're saying, let's be honest with the experience that we had. Let's focus on effort. In other words, the things that we could control, right? Not the things that we couldn't control. When we're reflecting, we focusing on the things that we can control. And we're saying, gee, how did I show up every day? Did I give it all that I have? Was I challenging and asking the right questions and disciplining myself and that kind of a thing, right? So that's us being focused on effort. And then we talked about making just like this analysis and contrasting, right? What went so well, what didn't go so well, what could we do to make it different? What could move us from a 7 to an 8 or a 6 to an 8, something like that. Make those contrasts and so you can kind of get a better perspective. And then while we worked on the reflection point, we talked about these markers and these memorials, right? And the idea is, we said, when you go through a tough time, a tough experience, when you encounter a loss, when you miss a goal, don't just, pass by and again, minimize it. We say, no, let it soak in. When you feel that hurt, when you see the loss, let it soak in for a minute, just so you can what? Learn from it. If you don't let it soak in, it's gone. And we showed an image that we found on social media. Today I'll have a different one. And it was a video of a young man who was in like a police interrogation room. And I believe it was his grandmother who was speaking with him. And, she was basically just confronting him with the reality that you are in some deep trouble right now. And I really don't know how it's going to work. I'm paraphrasing. You can go back and check out our session 1 on that. She's like, I don't know how it's going to work out for you. However, let's learn from it. And she was saying, look, if God gets you out of this and makes a way, then you know what you got to do. Anyhow, so we're saying that experience right there should be enough to cut that young man, not physically, but at the heart, and crush that proud-filled spirit or that foolish spirit that got him into trouble. And then while we talk about those markers, we said, let's revolve, and not supposed to be resolve, that should be resolved within ourselves, right? That should be resolved within ourselves, that we're going to get up from here. We're going to make changes. We're going to do things right. And that transition into that pulpit and a promise where you stand up, you speak to it, you speak to your future, and you write it down. I won't go too long on that. All right. So hopefully you were with me. You got that. Let's go to the next thing here. The second one we talked about, then session 2, we talked about we talked about what? See, my brain is slipping for a moment. That's when we say, we talk about a professional, right? And so this is the B stage, And we talked about having this portrait or this image of them in mind, what a professional is. It's very important for us to have an image in mind of what a professional is. And I won't put it back on the screen, but we had almost like the, some people might call it a word map, or I call it basically this word association, where we use the word professional and we came up with some words, and hopefully you did the exercise at home. You came up with some words that come to your mind as you thought about a professional. And this is important because when you're trying to be something or become something, it's good to visualize that thing, right? And so we got up with those words and we described it. One of those words, for example, was an expert. I won't go back on through the message, but you get the idea. And then we said professionals, they show up, they engage, and they produce. They show up as a professional. That could be everything from your attitude to the way you dress. You show up as a professional. So for my younger students or even the college age students, you want to show up as a professional mentally, right? And so on and so forth. And we shared some ideas from myself and some people from my community who shared their tips on how they be a professional on a day to day. Somebody said, "Hey, I make a list the night before, right, of what I need to do." So those are some ideas. All right. So show up, you engage, and how you treat other people, and then you produce. In other words, the work that you produce should reflect the time that you have been given, no matter where you are, on the job, in your classroom, doesn't matter. If you've been given 2 weeks to do an assignment, it should look like you had 2 weeks to do an assignment, not like you had 2 minutes, right? So you go in. If the boss or your supervisor gives you something to do and it's doing, in 7 days, then make it look as if you worked on that thing. You had time. Got me? All right. Again, we're not talking about being perfect. And then we went into when we talk about professional, we talked about having these systems and these procedures and these routines, right? These things help us to do things more efficiently, more effectively, and literally kind of be a rock star. Sometimes people see what we do and it looks easy. No, we've probably built systems, procedures, and routines to help us shine when we get into that environment or when we've been given that task. Correct? And then we kind of ended that session by talking about um, adding these subtraction and addition. We create a little math problem saying some things we need to subtract, these negative attributes we need to subtract. And I won't go into the details with that one as well. Look back on the session. We talked about things that we needed to subtract from that environment. And one of those things we talked about was misconceptions. Sometimes we have some misconceptions, I believe, about learning stuff or doing something, right? All right, so let's move on. So again, this is the B category. Again, this is coming from this cycle that we did earlier. If just so you're with me, I could put it up on one chart, but I wanted to be a little bit fancy today. So again, we're working this cycle that I call it a re-be pace cycle, right? It's the cycle of managing change, especially when we want to go from one point to another. And so now we've talked about the reflect, we recap the B, and then here's the pause, which is where we dived into last week. We talk about the pause. And when we talked about pausing, we call it a pit stops, but it's the pause. We talked about the mechanics of a pit stop. We use the analogy, the storytelling from the NASCAR or the F1 series, then Formula One, where these drivers have these high performance cars and they're zooming at hundreds of miles an hour around this track, right? And they're going fast and they're going hard and they're doing it for a long time. And so they have to make these pit stops where they make exchanges. They swap out old tires for new ones and so on and so forth. And the idea is that while we're on our journey to go where we want to go, do what we want to do, we too must create a pause, a pit stop where we pull aside and we get service, so to speak. We do a checkup from the neck up, hey, right? And we just make sure we look and that we're doing okay. Then we talked about in the middle here, it says, we talked about the nature of a pit stop. So one, we talk about the mechanics. Two, we talk about the nature. We said they were strategic, their time, their plan. And we need to make time to do those. We need to be strategic, even though it might look like everybody else is running ahead and having all the fun. And we might look like we're losing our place because we pulled off the track. No, we want to make sure that we are staying on track, right? And we're servicing ourselves. They're timed. We're not taking a pit stop for a super long time. No, we got to get back in the race, right? We're not saying take a time out and never do life. No, that's kind of not what we want to do. Anyhow, and they're planned. All right. And lastly, we talked about this plan. When we say plan, meaning there's a plan when we pull over of things we need to do. It's not just by random. We need to rest. We need to think. We need to journal, those kinds of activities. We need to talk to somebody. So they're planned. It's not just, oh, I'm gonna take a break from doing work. That's not really very restful. That's not the pit stop we're talking about, right? And we said how if you went on a winter break or school break, a spring break, or whatever holiday, sometimes that doesn't do it because you didn't plan any activity to refresh you so you can get back on your journey. And then we talked about having a visual signal. It's very good to create one. Especially adults might know how to communicate. Older adults might say to someone, hey, I ain't feeling it today. But younger people might not do it very tactfully. They tend to blow up, erupt, be condescending. So you need to create a visual clue that communicates to people. Even if you don't feel like talking, it might be a teacher that says, you know what, today, I'm not feeling it today. And, maybe you can come ahead of time and create that at the beginning of the year, or maybe with that teacher, how to communicate that. All right. Anyhow, so today we're going into this one, which we're talking about. When I'm talking about, it's called charge. This is our cycle of power banks. And so hopefully we can work through this real quickly. So you see there already, I've already introduced you to my Rebe pace cycle, right? My Rebe pace cycle. The RE stands for, that's right, reflection. The BE stands for be a professional. And then the PA stands for, I forgot, pit stops? No. Pause. I have to go back to my chart. Anyhow, let's move on. So the next big thing I want to talk about is this influence. Influence. And then the following week, we'll get into this expansion thing. So let's talk about influence. Influence right here. Let me move this around. All right. Influence versus intention. Now, this is huge. Influence versus intention. All that we want to do, all that we have said, this is where we say the rubber meets the road. This is where things, good ideas die, plans, whatever, right? It all comes down to this. Sometimes, first of all, it says influence versus intention. There's a lot that we want to do, right? But the influence that we come across sometimes take our mind off of where we want to go or the things that we want to do. And some of us have a different level of competence or proficiency in this, depending on, where you are mentally. Now, as you get older, hopefully you're building a good enough kind of a balance where influence doesn't sway you from your intention, unless they're negative intentions, obviously, something that's harmful. But if you have a solid intention or a goal, to do something vibrant, do something productive, do something meaningful, and that will bless the world, we like to say, make a great impact. You don't want to sway from that, right? But influence can sway us because we are powered, number one, by connection. Now I'm going to introduce you to another chart today as I talk about this, right? So, but the idea is, you've probably heard this quote where it says, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Now, a lot of people that's thrown up probably have said that, but the best citation I can give for it, this guy, St. Bernard Clairvaux. I give him the credit for that. But the idea behind this is the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So it should send the connotation that sometimes there's a lot of people who have end up in some bad places because they had something good, but maybe the way they went about it wasn't good, right? Or they missed the mark somehow. But I could also apply this to the idea that I've heard, for example, Dr. Miles Monroe would say the richest or the wealthiest place on earth is the cemetery. There's a lot of people who do not fulfill the plan that they had or the goal that they believe God has given them, the vision, the idea. And sometimes there's some big ideas that might outlive you or you don't get a chance to finish it, right? You might start it, you might work on it, but for whatever reason, you might not be the one who finish it. And I understand that. We're not talking about that in this application. We're talking about wanting to do something, setting your mind to do something, but somehow or another, you don't complete it because you were influenced negatively to move away from that idea, to sway from that idea. And that happens to all of us at every stage of life, young or old, because we are so connected to people and people matter to us. And I know we like to think that opposite. No, they don't. I do my own thing. I'm my own guy. That kind of talk. Yeah. I say that too. However, the truth of the matter is influence can sway us. Now, influence is not just, it's not just, let me throw this chart up first. Let me show you, and then we can dive in. I'm gonna come back. Sometimes I have all these things, and I said, "What's the best way I want to do it?" So let's hold this, and we get back, right? Because what I'm saying is, people influence, and there's different categories. So let me go to this first. If I threw this chart, I'm gonna tell you about what I call these connections. There's people, there is ideas, and there is events. You're not going to be able to read this, perhaps, especially if you're looking at it on a small device. But it's my pie connection chart that I've listed: people, ideas, and events. Three different things, or not different things. Yeah, three different things that kind of influence us: people, ideas, and events. Now, when we're saying people, obviously, people's kind of straightforward. These are these independent figures or groups that impress ideas by sharing, modeling, and expressing to us, right? People shape the way we think, and the way we think kind of rolls off. Here's a video I'm going to share this week with you. Now, the thing about this one, I'm hoping let's do this. I'm not going to play the audio again for these copyright thingies. Let's do it this way. All right, let me try to do this one. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah, wrong screen though. Mm-hmm. Hang with me. I thought I had this cue, but I didn't. I did, but I didn't. You can see me, but I want you to see this one. Why are you not seeing this one? Dang it. Hang in there. You know what? I'm going to just take this here and I'm going to put it over here. That's what I'm going to do. All right. All right. So you can see on the screen, my bad for the pause. This is where I got this from for the sake of citation, but I'm not going to play the audio because several reasons. Well, one, the baby swearing and all that. So boom. All right. So this video, pay attention. You've probably seen this. This young girl is riding along and she's rapping the lyrics to this song. Look at her gestures. Look at her eyeballs. She's looking at the person who's riding in the car. Now you can tell this girl looks like, see, once in a while she looks over at the person who's riding with her with the car. She's bar for bar. She's repeating these lines in this lyrics. And she's going all in. Look at the mannerism. Look at the expression on her face. Look at her energy, right? She's going on in. Now, the guy's making this commentary about it, right? And he's just talking about the negative influence, of music. And he's referencing also the adult in the room. So when I say that we are influenced by people, this is what I mean. And all to a different level. Adults do it too. But I use this version with the child to kind of show this image. Again, I play it one more time for us to see. She's rapping the lyrics. She's eye checking once in a while, looking at the person driving the vehicle. Like almost like she's looking for that validation. She's looking for that smile, that whatever it is that the other person is going to give to say, this is good, keep it going, right? almost like that endorsement. Several times she looks over, goes back, still rapping, still quoting the lyrics, look at the hand movements and all of that. And I don't know if they had looped it. Okay, so hopefully you get my point on that. I like to share one of these once in a while just to make the point. So when we're talking about influence, we all have this ability. Now, this is an extreme case, right? Because obviously some of us don't do this, but we are very much motivated by the applaud, or, I say applaud or attention and affection or endorsement of people. So when I share the chart and I say that my pie chart saying people, ideas, and events influence us, and sometimes they're all wrapped in one, right? So you can see here the influence of, first of all, on this young child. And there's a lot of things happening in it. So when I put this chart up, if I had the time and we were in a kind of a working setting, I would allow you to fill in some ideas first, some people, some situations, not necessarily particular people, but that have that kind of influence on you, and then so on and so forth. So we can see the girl that's, she's vibing out to this thing. And again, we're talking about the influence that's on her. And so many of us are like that. Not to that extreme, but if you're an older person or a younger person, wherever you are, there's a reason why we do what we do. And so sometimes we can have the goal. I've shared oftentimes, there was a time when I was young that I wanted to be a fireman, right? Or an architect. But there are ideas that got into my mind that swayed me. Some of those ideas could be just trial and error. Maybe, for example, as wanted to be an architect, I didn't like geometry for whatever reason. Maybe it was the way it was being taught, something. And I would tell myself, or the idea got in my mind, like, or I heard somebody say to me once, probably was a teacher, how are you going to do architecture if you don't like geometry? And sometimes those negative ideas can plant such a root that takes me off course. Now, I'm not blaming anyone to say I'm not an architect today because somebody popped my bubble, so to speak, right? This is not a blame thing. However, I do want to just kind of show that ideas can change your trajectory, right? Or the influence of others can change that trajectory. So on my chart, I went in and I filled in some later on my chart. I plugged in some things into this pie thingy, my pie connection table, and I just listed people just to give people the idea, like your parents or your peers or your friends, significant others, just to get you thinking, right? Leaders or prominent figures, all these kinds of things can help shape or influence your ideas. So the plans that you have, the hopes that you desire, if this is a 9-month, a 1-year goal you have, within that time frame, there are people you come across, even just a 1-year time frame or a 9-month time frame or a 6-month time frame. There's people that you engage with that literally can plant seeds, ideas, and they might not have to say it. Sometimes they model it. That's why I kind of wrote my own little definition in here. They can share things. They can model things that that express to you ideas, right? And we, by nature, are consumers. We consume people, not just food and clothes and other things. We consume people, not literally eat them, but in a sense, we kind of digest them. We take them in other ways. We take their ideas, the way they dress. And so, one of my previous pastors used to say, what I have is contagious. What I have is contagious. Not really meaning he had any kind of a virus, but he himself can be contagious. And people are very contagious. And whether we realize it or not, just being exposed to people, even for a little period of time, can literally shape or influence you in such a way, right? And ideas are the same thing. And before I get down to ideas part, let me show this one back that I had up earlier, just to put my chart back up where it says the influence. Sometimes influence, the bottom one says influence is greater than intention. That's my little math. I like to throw a little math in there for you. So sometimes the influence is greater than your intention. So, in other words, that influence can be so strong that it literally supersedes what you intend. You can intend um, to grow up and, never use drugs. That could be your intent. But you can be in an influence around people or receive ideas or even at events, or events can occur in your life that stress you to the point that you somehow now give up on your intention or put your intention on the side, right? Traumatic event happens and you start leaning on a cigarette or other substances or alcohol or something like that. So I'm showing you examples that can literally shape what you want to do. So that's something we need to think about, your influence and intention. And sometimes influence, especially if you're weaker, can supersede your intention. So now let's back to my chart, my pie connection chart. Pie. P stands for people. I stands for ideas. Let's talk a little bit of ideas now, because I just ran down the list of different things, right? How many things you do for your peers, or your peers sometimes sway you while you're along your journey. They've said things, right? And that sways you. They're acting a certain way and that sways you, so on and so forth. I have music. I'll talk about that in a minute. Let's talk about ideas now. This is an intangible thing that provides a greater level of perceived satisfaction or meaning. So ideas now can influence us. Now, ideas don't just come from themselves, they also come from people, right? Some of the songs we just talked about, that song right there, we just kind of showed you without the lyrics what was going on in the song. But sometimes the lyrics of songs provide an idea. They make you think this is the way. Get more money and you're going to be good for life, right? Get more expensive things and life is good. Now, I don't want to go off on too far off, but in the same way, people give us ideas that sway us from the goal. And we need to think about this too as we're on this journey. And so I've listed a few things in my chart. Now, I know I've skipped this out with you, but I've listed a few things. Here's some ideas. There's one of the ideas of love and belonging. Love and belonging. We all want love and a little bit of belonging, don't we? Of course. So sometimes just to belong or to be accepted, we end up swaying from what was. Again, referring back to the video we just watched, that eye contact that the young girl made when she kept looking over to the driver, that eye contact was basically her saying, "Hey, are you pleased? Are you feeling me? Am I doing good? Do you like that?" Right? Now, she didn't say all that, but she's looking for that affirmation from whomever kind of spiced her up, powered her up, right? Somebody powered her up. First of all, for letting her be in the environment, for hearing those lyrics, for modeling, because whether it was a video she saw or whomever gave her access to it was doing the modeling. You don't make those signals. You don't make those hand gestures and all of that she was doing. It didn't just come into her mind. She got it from somewhere. Again, this is an extreme case, obviously, but in little ways like this too, whether you are at the place of work, in a classroom, at a school, right, in your neighborhood, these same influences can creep in different forms that have you going places that you never intend on going, doing things that you never intend on doing, dropping good habits that you never intend of dropping, right? So hopefully you can go there, even though I'm painting a picture of one thing, all right? You could drop habits, ideas, values that you once had. You can put them down, right? You get where I'm going. So I've listed a few more under ideas. I talked about freedom. That's an idea, right? God, heaven, that's an idea. And it's not always good. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's bad. We know people have done terrible things in the name of God or a God, right? We know people have done great things in the name of God. So ideas can drive us. In my social studies group, I talked about one of the things here, and I'll just say something like, I'll do this one. The mandate of heaven was a belief that ancient China had in their politics, basically, that they had the God-given right to rule, right? As long as they would do good and treat the people right, so on and so forth. The mandate of heaven, right? So ideas can be good, that drives us, influence us, and align maybe with our intention, or they could be not so good and they take us away, right? So again, the idea section, I've listed a few things, right, along there. So let's go back one before I jump into events, right? So now let's just do events. So then we talk about events. There's an activity that stirs the soul. It provides meaning, fulfillment, or some sort of feeling that make us either yay or nay. It could be negative, traumatic events, right? It could be something exciting, right? Like going to a concert, right? And it gives you a positive vibe. It gives you a charge, for some people. Or you could do something like you go to a church service and just with everybody collectively worshiping together, for example, that might give you a positive charge. This is why we're saying these are power banks. These are things that give us power and influence us in a way that moves on. Now, I had a note at the very bottom that says, consider the idea of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Depending on how old you are, you may have heard this term, which the basic idea is just like we all have these psychological or these needs. And there's a hierarchy. I'm not saying there's a hierarchy in this particular thing because not everybody agrees with the hierarchy thing anyhow. But it's just the idea that we all need certain things, right? We all need love and affection. We all need food, and then so on and so forth. Now, obviously, Maslow's hierarchy needs is a little different. We're not talking about the hierarchy, just the idea that there's these needs that we all have, and honestly, we probably place them at different level, prioritize them at different level, depending on who we are. We know that in middle school, everybody likes to eat, right? Kids still like to eat. But also stronger in during this time, their peers tend to have more of an influence or a sway over them sometimes than their parents, right? It's like the need to be with those peers or to be accepted by those peers. So to act like those peers, they might put down some of the things, their values and that they had from home when they're around their peers. You get the idea. All right, so let's do the very last one. So these events now, these activities that stirs our souls, they could be anything, good or bad, right? For some people, they like if it's fun or it seems like fun, that's where they are. And so sometimes fun outweighs everything else. Fun have them doing things on a higher level, so to speak, right? So sometimes the fun, excuse me, sometimes the fun does the driving. The fun dictates what they do. So if you're ever on your journey, maybe you said, hey, I'm going to be an A student. I'm going to turn in all my assignments. I'm going to study, right? But somewhere along the line, you realize some people are having lots of fun and you really want fun in something you're lacking. That becomes a driving force. Then that might take over. Anyhow, and then I've listed out different kinds of events. They could be conflict. Some people love fights. Some people love a good fight. They're drawn to fight, right? So these kind of things, again, they influence us a lot. So good intentions is gone when there's a fight for that person because they thrive off of that for some reason, right? And on and on and on. So now sometimes, although I broke it up into people, ideas, and events, right? Here's an example of that very last row, not the second to last row, where it talks about musicians in bold, music in a concert. So people could be the musicians. The ideas could just what the music itself or the lyrics or the chords, kind of impress on you, so to speak. And then the event can be a concert. So what I'm saying is they work together, but I won't go too deep into that today. All right, so let's kind of wind this down because that's where we're at. So hopefully now you get the idea of these three different things where I'm saying these people, ideas, and events kind of work together to kind of shape our influence. And we could have extended this, but I wanted just to crunch and give a deep size. So now I wanted to make sure I ended by telling you, and I don't know if I created this one. Being plugged in. And we're going to focus on the first one because part of us having this power, you need to be plugged in. And we are all plugged in, but I want us to be conscious of where we're plugged in, where we're getting our power from, right? And one of the strategies, I want to focus first of all on parents, peers, and professionals. Parents, peers, and professionals. Parents. Now, even the younger or to the older, parents are valuable. And depending on where you are, you know, you still want to not rely, but lean or test or, get some of that counsel. You don't have to accept everything, especially if you're older, so to speak, right? But the younger ones, yes, you still want to lean on those parents' advice, right? So you want to be plugged into these three different people groups. Your parents, because why? They're older than you. They have lived and seen different stages of life, right? They've experienced different things. They've seen, they've heard, so on and so forth. And so hopefully, if you have a good relationship with that parent, you can kind of ask some questions. You can ask for input. My boys are a little older. Once in a while, they'll ask me something, and I know that the choice is still there, but at least I appreciate the fact that they say, hey, you think this is a good idea? Should I apply for this job? Should I pick this one over that one? That kind of a thing. Should I take these classes? Whatever it might be. And it's their decision, but the beauty of having parents is, one, that they care. That they love you. That they want the best for you. Now, I apologize if you don't have a good relationship with a parent, right? Maybe that's not your situation, but you probably have somebody then who's more like a parental figure or a mentor figure. Maybe you can substitute that one in, although we kind of talk about that later in my professionals. But if you're the kind of person who says, hey, I don't really have a parent, or I'm not on good terms, whatever. But you know what? Even if you have a parent that you're not on the best terms with, right, for whatever reason, they might, especially if they've done you wrong, you felt they've done you wrong, they have a conscience too. And if they're sober, you can probably learn from their mistakes or what they miss out on, right? So, keep that in mind. So, for example, maybe your father or your mama didn't go to college. It doesn't mean you can't ask, because they never went, right? Because they might say one or two things that say, you know what, and you get a little momentum from that. Anyhow, so parents are very good. Parents shouldn't, although they're not on your level, so they hopefully going to give you the truth. Now, being plugged into peers is good because it's a hard journey. That's the second group, being plugged into. We're talking about power banks. One is parent, right? Two, we're saying peers. Being plugged into peers is good because they're out there with you. They're on the same level. They're experiencing some of the same things. I'm not saying the exact same thing, but they're experiencing it with you too. Now, the point is to know sometimes peers, they're not as confrontive, if that's the word. They won't confront you necessarily if you're doing wrong. Sometimes peers are just too accepting. They're very accepting and supportive and yeah, they're on your level. So sometimes they don't challenge you, right? They don't challenge you. So it's good to have them because they're out there with you. They understand and they can probably bounce some things off of you. However, that's where the balance of keeping other people being plugged in to parents and lastly professionals. But pairs is important. Now you have to select pairs that are going somewhere. Select pairs that are motivated. Select pairs that are inspiring. And what I mean by inspiring, it might mean they're doing their thing too. They got a goal they're reaching for. That you see them making a conscious effort to do right. We're not talking about a pair that's perfect because we're all gonna have our mess ups. But hopefully you have a pair, somebody on your level in your age group that's has a similar mindset as you as far as a work ethic. That they're working towards something, right? They care about their classes. They care about having a good relationship with their friends. Maybe they care about having a good job in the future. So those are pairs you want to vibe with. And you see them making a conscious effort to do what is good or what is right. Those are the pairs to be plugged in. Now, I'm not saying don't have pairs. There might be some people that you're around who are not as, what do you call it? As on their game. I'm not saying don't be around those people, but you got to know those people can also be those negative forces. All right. And then lastly, let's talk a little bit about those professionals. I'm just checking my time. I got my time counting down 1 minute, but I still got 10 minutes before the 10 o'clock. Anyhow, then the third group of people, we talking about plugins, and this one's not on the board, but we're talking about plugging into this to these things, we're talking about professionals, teachers, advisors, counselors, coaches, pastors, I don't know, people who are not necessarily relative, although some of them can be relative, right? But these are people, they might not necessarily be relative, but they are professionals. They're working in a space that they like, right? They're working in a space that they are professional. This is where they're skilled in. This is where they're spending their time in, right? They're proven, that kind of a thing. You need these people to be plugged in, so to speak, as part of your power bank, because they will help provide and fill in missing gap and steer you correctly, right? Now, yes, I do know some people abuse their power. Hopefully you can recognize when somebody's abusing their power and you not let be abused by that power. But anyhow, other than that, professionals, we're talking about people with those good intentions. And that's why I said proven people. You know, they're in their space and that's where they're at. There's nothing funny about them. They're just doing their thing, right? Those people can help you going forward. So you might have a couple of teachers. I know some people say, teachers don't care. Well, find one that do. I know some do because I mingle with some teachers. I've been around teachers for years. Not all teachers are there for a paycheck. So find one or two teachers that you know is really good and really focused. And then depending on the subject or where the relationship, you can ask for some positive vibes, maybe regarding your next steps, regarding college or high school or a job or a career. And then along those lines, save an email address that you can get references from, right? Plugged in to these people, advisors, right? They could be on your job. I don't know about HR on some jobs, not trying to belittle HR, but, know what you can share and what you can't. And I'm not saying all the HR people are bad people. I know some people who work in HR. They're very good. But yeah, just be mindful of that. Anyhow, counselors and coaches, you get my point. All right. So I think we've given a lot of details right here that can help you as far as people to be plugged into. I'm getting a text. I'm trying to see if it's really important. Could be. All right. All right. So we're good. So I'm at the end of this session, although we've got like 8 more minutes before my 10th hour. So I've put a lot in this session, and honestly, I could split this up and do one Thursday, but I don't know if I can have the time commitment this week because there's some other things that I want to take care of. However, hopefully, one, I've introduced you to what I call my pace chart, the pace that you should be going at, that you'll be working at as you're trying to get to your next goal, achieve your next level of whatever it is, right? Whether it's the next 9 months we're shooting for, the next 6 months, the next year, and you're saying you're trying to get to the end of this thing and have people say, wow, I love the fact that I had this person in my class, on my job, on my team, right? Right? And so the pace chart is saying this is the pace we go at. And the pace meaning the distance and the frequency. We're going to reflect on things. We're going to be things, right? After we reflect and we set our boom. And I want to say this too, because I like to cross-pollinate and plant ideas in your head, especially if you're older. They have this thing called a PDA project cycle. No, PDCA, I'm sorry. P is for plan, D is for doing, right? C is for check, and the A is for acting on whatever you have discovered while you checked, right? So it's PDCA, plan, do, check, act. That is a good framework. I didn't copy this, but as I was finishing mine, it brought me back to that. If you've been in my coaching corner, I've always do these kind of frameworks I like to create. I like to create my own theories. Maybe I'll leave some behind and let the next generation try to poke holes in them, because that's what we do with theories right now. You go to school to learn someone else's theory and all their frameworks and read the negative argument, the rebuttal against them. All right. So I've introduced you to this chart today intentionally so that you can think about, you keep a rhythm. So your goal is not on autopilot. You don't just say, yeah, boom, and you go. No, your goal is on this rhythm that you're working with, that you reflect, you come up with your plan, you know what you got to do, and then you go out there and you do it. You be it. You're being that professional. You're showing up and so on and so forth. And then you're making time occasionally to pause. That's your check phase. That's when you're pausing, you're taking your pit stop, you kind of revisiting ideas and seeing how you're doing, check on your own emotional or what they call your mental health, so to speak. So you know that you're still going the course. And then you're going to think about those power banks that you're plugged into, those people that you're around, those ideas that come into our minds, that comes from other places. That's why I gave you my pie connection chart, my people, ideas, and events. Because events, I didn't spend too much time on them, but events shape the way we think too. We have a negative experience or somebody lets us down. Just the experience alone can shape our thing, right? Or we take a course one time and we didn't do so well at that course. We think we're a terrible learner. That experience shape our thinking, right? And you might start telling yourself, well, I failed the last time, I'm going to fail again, or I'm not good at this. And this is something that professionals are trying to work to overcome right now, because we know sometimes a bad learning experience, a failed class, stuff like that can make you create this internal dialogue that makes you feel as if you're no good, right? So anyhow, that's the cycle. Next week, then we'll go into these deep deposits. That'll be the last one. So for today, if you can take anything away, put yourself on this cycle that you know that you're going to get there. I didn't say and emphasize it enough, but our goals literally fall to the ground really mainly because of these power banks we talk about today. That is the people we're connected to, the ideas that, we entertain or we adopt, right? And the events that happen to us. Right. And I didn't do some of the quotes because I said, I know we could go long, but I didn't want to go long. And I wasn't sure if I can make 2 sessions. But if you can see here, I put some other quotes up here. People are like elevators at the bottom of the people. My pastor used to say this one as well, the ex-pastor. He said, people are like elevators. I know a lot of people have said it, but you get it. They take you up or they take you down, right? People are like elevators, right? Oftentimes, yeah, I'm going to leave it like that. People can bring you up, or people can bring you down. So you want to realize, again, we're not blaming people, but the time you spend with people is important. Then the ideas, I put another quote in here, it says, the mind, once stretched by one new idea, never regains its original dimensions. Ooh, that's a pretty good one. Oliver Wendell Holmes, the senior and the junior, we cite for that one. The mind, once it's stretched by a new idea, it never regains its original dimensions. That's good. Talks about the power of learning, but also to, it cannot be good. Like sometimes one of my sons will say, man, it needs some brain bleach for that one. Sometimes you experience something, there's something that you wish you could just unsee, or something that you hear. Some of those ideas could literally just throw you for a wrench. And then input one for events can be the same way. But I like to say this pie chart, this pie, people, ideas, and events, they could be like a portal that opens up a whole different realm to us, you and me. People, ideas, and events can be like a portal that opens new worlds for us. So that is really important. That could be good or could be bad. That means the people, ideas, and stuff that we get around can take us from one place to another place. And sometimes it's not the best places. So let's be mindful for that. And right there is where I ended, because we are keeping to the clock. I think we've done a lot, and it's 2 minutes before the hour is up. So we ran a good race today, like always, I believe. Next week, we got the last session that I'm going to do in this. So I'm grateful for those who watch now or watch later. And hopefully you've gotten something out of this that's going to help you get to the goal that you have. Because like we've said, 1 year from today, you can adjust that time frame as you need. But I'm going to say 1 year from today, 1 year from today, will you discover that you're being tolerated or you're celebrated. Yeah. All right, guys. Next week, we'll take it one step further. And we're going to do deep deposits. That's the last one in this series. All right. What are you waiting for? Get out of here. Go do something.